Alors, bonjour à tous, bon après-midi, good afternoon. Welcome to this second episode of In Conversation With, deuxième épisode de notre série en conversation. En premier, l'OF aimerait reconnaître l'appui du gouvernement du Canada. The OF acknowledges the Government of Canada's support et de Emploi Québec, Île de Montréal. L'OF remercie ses commanditaires. The OF would like to thank their private sponsors, Canimex et Panorama Media. Et l'OF remercie les fondations suivantes. The OF would like to thank the following foundations: la Fondation RBC, la Fondation Sibylla SE, le Fonds AIDA de la Fondation Jeunesse musicale du Canada, ainsi que la Fondation de la famille Zeller. Alors, merci à nos partenaires. We invite you to have a look at our different social medias accounts on Instagram, on Facebook. You are watching now on YouTube Live. Nous vous invitons à regarder nos différents médias sociaux et évidemment aussi notre site web, our website at www.orchestrefranco.com. Vous allez pouvoir trouver toutes les informations et le calendrier des différentes activités à venir au cours des prochaines semaines et de l'été. On a aussi le hashtag de l'OF qui est hashtag OF 2021. Si vous avez envie de partager des commentaires, des souvenirs ou des photos, ça nous fait plaisir. Alors aujourd'hui, pour ce deuxième épisode, for this second episode, it's a real pleasure to welcome a wonderful artist, multi-talented artist, who's leading a wonderful career on many fronts, Marina Thibeault. Bonjour Marina.
Bonjour Jean-Philippe, bonjour à toute l'OF.
And we'll be talking about lots of things today, but our main meal should be around the gender issues and inequalities, and we wanted to look at that in the context of from the Victorian era to about where we are now. We will be using a few musical examples to get this going and to also show your wonderful playing and the wonderful work you're doing with those composers. Marina, c'est un grand plaisir de t'accueillir aujourd'hui. It's a real pleasure to welcome you. Before we get into any questions, I'd love to, for everybody who's watching live now, to hear you. It's the best presentation possible. And I think you wanted me to start with the Rebecca Clark Sonata.
Yes, for me, it's still quite early on the West Coast, so it will be a good wake-up call.
Super. So let's let the music introduce you. I will share my screen.
And Jean-Philippe, maybe while you're fishing for the video, I'll just give a little bit of context of where that video
Thank you, Marina.
So I started my doctoral degree just as I was pretty much giving birth to my firstborn. And I will tell you all later why I ended up choosing this topic, but I started discovering Rebecca Clark at the very early stages of my studies, and she has such an incredible, rich life that was full of obstacles and challenges. But what you'll be able to hear is the panache and the power that is in this piece, and I'll tell you why that is later.
Sorry, I'm gonna just stop there. We'll come back to it, Marina. It's very hard to stop that music. It's so beautiful and passionate. So now you've discovered the wonderful violist and chamber player that Marina is. Marina also teaches at UBC in Vancouver. Marina, you've done lots of research into women composers. You've been a very strong defender. So how does the Clark Sonata fit in all of those activities and research that you've done?
Well, I mean, it's, as you say, it's the main dish because it's so substantial musically, and yet her story and how she was raised, the music education that she had, her career as a performer, as a composer, she was a pioneer, and as a violist, she was, the first. I mean, I know Lillian Fuchs is known in the States as the first lady, but Rebecca Clark in England in the late Victorian era, she was like a few years earlier than Fuchs, and I decided to look at her primarily. I wanted to share a few data from the music industry that will be eye-opening. You've probably seen them, but if you haven't, that's what actually triggered me to encourage me to pursue this topic as my main doctoral research. In 2014, there was a report published by the NPR that stated that, let me get it right, so it's 1.8% that concert music from the 21 largest orchestras in America were, programming women music. So 1.8% of the whole yearly programming. So that's music on stage by main orchestras. On the radio, 2015, ABC Classics demonstrated that 2.2% of music were written by women composers. And there's a slight improvement from data in 2018-19 to 9.9.
And do you have a feeling it got better a little bit in the last few years, or?
Well, this is from 2019, right? So
Oh, this
I mean,
19. Okay, I
yeah,
heard 14. Sorry.
the
Okay.
increase was from 2019. So, and then there's the pandemic, and then I think the pandemic also was a great opportunity for self-reflections and awareness of these problems and developing problem-solving strategies. But I'm eager to have more recent data. If anyone has more recent data, please share in the chat. That would be really incredible. But yeah, if you Google like NPR to 2014 women composers, you'll find the report, and it's that's what drove me to, okay, I'm gonna use this as a main topic. But of course, as I'm a violist, I gave a full focus to this lady, Rebecca Clark, and then this lady, Lillian Fuchs, and the third lady called Karen Tuttle. So they were my trinity. They're actually the women that made it possible for me to do what I want today on stage and in the classroom, and so I owe them my free-ish career. So Rebecca Clark, do you want me to tell you her story in a nutshell?
That'd be great. And just to let's situate ourselves a little bit, because it sounds very romantic. And where are we in the music history? What years are we in with the Viola Sonata?
Oh, the Viola Sonata is 1919. So
okay,
more specifically, like end of the Edwardian era, which is it's my favorite fashion era as well. So Rebecca Clark, she already had a strange identity because her father was American and her mother was Irish. So she had all these different conflict of identities within herself, and she traveled throughout the States as a child, and later on, she spent half and half mostly her time between the two continents. And her father was an amateur cellist, and he was actually quite abusive person. In the late Victorian era, there was such conduct for women that you needed to be so proper, and especially in England, right? Very conservative. And for instance, Rebecca Clark was very anxious, probably because her dad was so tense. Let's say things how they were. Yeah, and she was biting her nails, and so she got severely punished by, like being, with a belt, these kind of things, so she was raised in that type of household in an era from, where Darwinism beliefs were very anchored in people's philosophies and views of women. So those views were that women were not capable of creative genius, and they could perform, and there's also something very vulnerable about being on stage, because the people, they look at you, it could be also like a voyeurism a little bit, so women were good for that. You could be on stage and being looked at. Most women were confined to playing with other women in amateur ensemble. Clark was part of an all-women string quartet. She was part of a piano quartet with really, really high all-stars players. But she was also a composer, and this is something that made her journey even harder. Because, as I said, for women to pursue in the musical path, well, you needed to play, be a performer or an educator. But even so, educator, you would be like a homeless educator. You would not teach in a renowned establishment. You would be going from home to home. And there's often in this era paintings of women reclining after a long day of teaching with a, like a beautiful dress and these really dirty boots. because they had just been walking around all over the city, giving rich people lessons, going home very tired at the end of the day with. So that's kind of the context that Rebecca Clark was raised. There's also a question of aesthetic, that if women dared to, dive into composing, well, first of all, they didn't have access to the full realm of music education. Clark was one of the very first composing students at the Royal Academy, and she was, before Royal College, a violin student. But then her theory professor was enamored with her and asked her to marry her, and she, had to change school. She described herself in those years as a pig-tailed violinist. She was like probably 13 or something horrendous like that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So when she pursued composition, actually, that was thanks to her dad, and he arranged. He sent some of her songs, some of her early works, to the teacher, and he accepted her. And she was one of the first women to have composing lessons, but she didn't have orchestration. All of the large grand déploiement aesthetic, women didn't have access. Even I found some research, even some women composers, that they couldn't take counterpoint because it was common knowledge that women couldn't even understand counterpoint. And so actually, Clark was asked by Sir Henry Wood to compose for his orchestra, but because she didn't have orchestration lesson and had the imposter syndrome, she declined. So he invited her along with 5 other women to join his orchestra. That was not for a permanent position, but they were the first women to play in an orchestra. So I have a little picture here. So Clark is she's in the middle, right here. Oh no, that's the all lady ensemble. Sorry, this is her piano quartet. This is a very pixelated picture. Sorry. So she's.
Yeah, cell phone were not that great, eh?
No, and those days. I don't know if you. I'm dressing in honor of Rebecca Clark today. In the center, you can. Oops, sorry. In the center, you can see she's wearing a lace collar, and this was apparently very daring and provocative.
See.
So yeah. So she, she was part of this orchestra for at least a summer. They were acting as extras. And there is a beautiful interview where Clark describes the moment she walked on stage for the first time, and that there's this man that just like started applauding this progressive change. And so she was part of these great first moments in history. She played with Pablo Casals. She collaborated with Ravel. She did workshops and concerts of his music. She even did tarot reading of Ravel. And could tell he was having an affair with this beautiful Black woman. And he was like, what? How do you even know this? So near the end of her life, there's all these rich interviews where she just, says everything. And that's part of this Rebecca Clark reader, which I recommend.
Certainly sounds fantastic. And at least we can see that her dad seemed to be supportive of her musical activities, which probably wasn't the case for
somewhat
everybody.
He was supportive of ensuring she would get that education, but because of a big blowout at one point, she needed to actually quit school, and in order to support herself, leave home because he was diagnosed with mental illness. So that's what she had to deal with, and of course there was no resources in that time, and that's really unfortunate for people in these households. So she basically, from that on, she supported herself. She traveled. She did world tours with viola programs, which is incredible. And shortly before 1919, so like 1918, she put on this great concert in New York. And she felt, of course, very self-conscious to program 2 pieces of hers on the program. So she decided to make one appear as under the name of Anthony Trent. Anthony because it's a name she liked, and Trent was a river in England near her home. And the Vogue magazine was attending the concert, and they raved about Anthony Trent and declared him the up-and-coming British composer of the 20th century, with a brief mention of Rebecca Clark and her nice work. So that's something for women liberation right there.
Did they learn about what happened when people learned about it was her behind the composition?
They didn't, right? They didn't. And
okay, they didn't.
Because it's only at the end of her life that she confessed. And the reason why she says herself that she killed Anthony Trent is that when people would ask about him, she would blush because, you know, she felt guilty that she was using a pseudonym, and then people thought she was having an affair with this person. So that's at this moment that she killed Anthony Trent for good. And 1919 came, and perhaps that was a learning experience for her. And so there's a really important patron in the States called Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge. She supported most of the musicians in the States, and she was Clark's neighbor, and they became quite good friends. And Coolidge told Clark, "Hey, I'm going to have this composition competition. You should, and we're gonna have viola submissions, like submissions for viola works. You should send something." And as part of this competition, all works are sent anonymously. And so this work that you heard it's known with her piano trio to be her most daring works, because she could send it without the label of what she was supposed to be as a woman composer, like this dainty aesthetic and writing for, like to be performed privately in the home, or, she could really set free from that and just write as she truly wished. And you heard a lot of the sonata form of this first movement, and there's some scholars that have described this as feminist sonata form. So you hear the beginning as this very masculine trumpet call, which is initially the A theme in a sonata is traditionally this male figure. And the B theme is like, oh, the pretty woman, like this is very gendered sonata form, actually. But and the moment that you stopped is funny, because it's when in the recapitulation, the B theme takes over. And all of the ta-dum, from the beginning is in the piano in this echoey, like afterthought, So she completely reverses the role of the sonata A and B themes, and how, the B theme actually wins in the end, which is an amazing analogy of what she's been through and what other women composers were dealing with in this 1919. So 1919, this competition story is not over.
That's the famous story, right? With the Bloch, Ernest Bloch, and
exactly. So right. They tied first, but at this point it was still anonymous. They were still just a sheet music in an envelope, right? And they asked Coolidge to break the tie. And anonymously, she picked Ernest Bloch's work. But there's some scholars that say that, Ernest Bloch's style was so distinctive that you could almost tell that it was him. And then there were some, okay, so before I get ahead of myself, after they unveiled the name of the winner, Ernest Bloch, because the other contestant had tied, this decided to unveil the identity. And then Coolidge said backstage to Clark, you should have seen their faces when they saw it was written by a woman. Like people were just, and then of course there were talk of like, it's not possible that she wrote it, Ravel wrote it, like it was all these, all these talks. And 2 years later, she entered in the piano trio competition. I believe she got second prize. So she almost made it. And then she entered the third time the Rhapsody for cello 2 years after that. She didn't win, but she got a special prize. So in the end, after that, it kind of fizzled out. She she composed small works like her viola and clarinet three pieces. And in her late 50s, she married to an old classmate of her, Frischkin. He was a piano teacher at Juilliard. And, you know, they married and she never really touched composition again. It was too consuming to her to, I'm not sure if there's any composers in the room, but it's a really immersive process that, you know, you wake up, you think about it all day, you can't sleep, you know, you wake up, you start again, and she couldn't deal with that. And
there's so much passion in her writing that it's so strong and meaningful. It's
yeah,
you can hear
that she was obsessed with it, right? And she writes so well. And I mean, I can understand why people thought it was Ravel, because of course she was influenced by him. She worked with him, and but you know, she's just on a similar scale of genius. She just didn't have the proper training, and that's something from if there's any gender studies enthusiastic in the room, is there's a great study by Marcia Citron. And you know, there's kind of like these 5 steps to become a established composer. First, you have to write a work, and then you have to get published, and then you need it to be premiered in public. You need it to be critiqued in a paper, and you need a positive assessment near the debut of the work. And that makes for a good longevity of one's work. And so that was Clark's problem. Is, you know, she wrote about 100 pieces, and most of them were for small effective songs, viola work, violin works, chamber music. But it's only near the end of her life that she had this revival.
Right. And what about her teaching activities? When was that a big part of her life? Or
I only found that she was giving conferences and private teaching. She was never offered any you know, position. I believe these conferences were part of the Chautauqua Festival. Am I saying the word properly?
I'm not going to risk it, but I don't
understand
which festival.
It's the established festival in the States where she was invited to give conferences. And, you know, because her husband was a piano teacher at Juilliard, there were always students in her house. And it's actually from one of her students, one of her husband's students, that she like browsed through some of her old scores in her home. And she gave it to Emmanuel Axe, who she was with. And then he, you know, they were exchanging on the phone. And then Clark was so embarrassed that she, you know, went in her drawers and found these things. And that's thanks to these people that people knew about her. And then Toby Apple did the Carnegie performance, and then there was great reviews. And so she got all of the steps, but way later. So the last step is positive assessment near debut.
Yeah. Well, what a piece! It has to be like one of the most beautiful part of the viola repertoire. It's a fantastic piece. Not easy, but it's you certainly made it sound easy. Let's travel back in time now a little bit, and let's if you that's okay with you, Marina, would listen a little bit to the Clara Schumann.
Hey, there's also, we have a little question. Someone is going to play the 3 pieces for clarinet and viola in November. That's great.
Oh, that's super. Look at that.
Wonderful. Send us your performance once it's done.
Oh yeah, I see that there. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's listen a little bit first, and you can tell us a little bit about it. We'll talk about it a little bit. So I'm gonna share my screen. This should go faster this time. And this is so much beauty in this. Bravo, it's beautiful.
It kind of breaks your heart, right?
Oh wow, that's romantic music at its best. Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the piece.
Well, I can tell you what I like about this.
Yeah, yeah.
What I love about Clara Schumann in general is, well, I talked about being a pioneer, but as a performer and educator, she had the best career that a woman could ever imagine in mid-century, 19th century. So, I mean, there's such power and vulnerability intertwined in her music. And, you know, I still can't believe to this day how much she was referred to as Robert's wife, you know, that she was the power in in the couple. I mean, she was such a rock star. You know, she was traveling and she had Brahms babysit her babies and change the nappies, you know, like she was highly critiqued for that. But she, you know, unlike Clark, she persevered, and it was even earlier. Clark, you know, as soon as she was married, her career fizzled out. But Clara Schumann, she, you know, she lived and breathed music. It was always part of her identity.
And she also got to write some orchestral music, some in the concerto type pieces.
I know of the piano concerto, but right. I'm not too familiar, and I should be. Have you played any of her music?
Just the piano concerto, but it's again so beautiful, and you can tell she already also has a very good knowledge of the orchestra. You know, you just wish she should have written also 4 symphonies or at least right. one. But yeah,
right. Well, it's also that she serves so much as a caretaker as well, right? Because speaking again of mental illness, these romances were written the same year that Robert Schumann was diagnosed with his mental illness, so that you can hear that, you know, these shards of emotions that like are daggers in the heart. And you know, a lot of people say that these 3 romances are in the style of Robert Schumann, but I think they're just Clara Schumann. They're in a couple. Like, I mean, if you're in a couple with someone, you rub off each other's aesthetic, right? Maybe he wrote in the style of Clara Schumann his romances.
Probably, you know, she was such a rock star too, and was like a touring wonderful virtuoso. Let's listen to the second one, and we'll come back. Let's have another little musical moment. It's too beautiful.
And the pianist playing Corey Hamm is a colleague of mine at UBC, and you know, the same with Marie-Ève Scarfone, who played in the Clark. To right. me, I describe them as like voice pianist. You know, like this is so an imitation of the human voice, and it's just like I feel like I'm in a Ferrari when I play with them. It's so luxurious. So kudos.
Perfect partner for that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Let's listen to the second one. Beautiful again, and that's storytelling at its best. Amazing. You can almost see it make yourself very easily a story about what's happening. A beautiful way of treating the viola as a human voice too. Wonderful.
Thank you. I mean, I always wondered about this one. This one is very odd to me for a romance. I almost feel like she's playing a trick on us, and
Yeah, it has some humor for.
Yeah, and the beginning is it's kind of like ugly pretty, you know, and has this wandering quality that feels unsafe, you know, like it doesn't feel like the typical aesthetic that would be expected of like appearing as beautiful and delicate, and there's like these sea monsters, you know, that are hiding in these tensions, and then I think is so satirical. Actually, the middle section where like a little girl in a field of flowers, and then she comes back again with this really dark material. I think this one always I have such a hard time with this one to make something of it, because it's like you can't do too much, otherwise you lose that romance quality. But actually, it has such depth. I always have to like pick my battles.
And you really tell a story when you play that. That's great playing and great humor was in there. It's the imagination, lots of imagination. That's great.
I have lots of imagination. Sometimes I could sell a few. You know, I would love to. I didn't mention this, but these romances were written for violin. I often forget because I've really just assimilated the works and say, "Thank you, violins. I'll just take that one." By the way, I use an arrangement, like a hybrid arrangement that I don't have it here. I don't know, but if you Google it, it's the first one that pops up. And then I use the violin urtex, and I try to choose as many of the real octave as possible, because the arrangement did a lot of just rewriting the voicing, and I wasn't too keen on that. But
it sounds very natural, and it sounds like you know, it's fine to steal things from the violins here and there. Yeah, they have way enough stuff.
Enough.
Yeah.
They have enough. But
so
yeah, it was
seen. Yeah, sorry.
It was written for the great violinist Joseph Joachim. So you know, who was behind the Brahms violin concerto and many works from that trio connection. I can just give you a few words from Clara Schumann, if you're interested. Yeah. And then if we listen to the third romance, I feel that is the embodiment of Clara Schumann as a pianist, the third romance. So it's almost like you'll get to hear her words and then her playing. Let me see what to pick. So, okay. She began composing when she was 9, but underestimated her work, such as Clark. I'm just a woman, after all, she wrote in 1838. And women are not made to be composers. that's how I console myself. So that's how she viewed her own works. And you can see there's a trend going on of imposter syndrome and self-consciousness.
Should we listen to the third one?
Yes, and then you hear the Clara the rock star, or Corey Haim as Clara Schumann.
Wonderful. That's such an amazing piece, and the great choices you made in the voicing, and it's beautiful in the viola tessitura also. It's wonderful.
I mean,
We've
what
talked.
fascinates me about this romance is I feel almost like, do you want me to leave? You know, like I could be playing this backstage and just like, let's have you all get all the credits, because I feel like a duck on water, you know, like just casually in for the ride, but then the pianist is like, "Wah!" and it's, I mean, he makes it seems very easy, but I've played this with such great pianists, and always they're like, can we do that one again? It's really,
you can tell they're great partners, and they are people using I mean, used to work with probably the leader and the world of the human voice, because the way they not follow, but the way it all gets together, it's so organic. It's fantastic.
that bass line is pretty juicy, and it's just like basing yourself every decision based on that bass line.
Oh, that bass line.
And
before we go on, Marina, I'll just encourage people to send us a few questions. We'll be taking questions in a few minutes, so you can go in the Q&R. That's at somewhere at the bottom of your screen. Vous pouvez nous envoyer des questions pour Marina, puis je vais me faire plaisir de les transmettre, de lui transmettre toutes vos questions aux commentaires.
And
so, Marina,
violists in the participants that I know. So, you know, if you just want to pop in with your video when we're done with the talk, and you just want to say hello, I would be happy to say hello.
That's nice. And also in the YouTube window, if you are watching this, members of the public, if you're watching this live on YouTube, you also can ask questions through the chat window in YouTube. So Marina, when you did probably all the research for your doctorate and everything, we've talked about those two wonderful composers, but you have other heroes, right? Want to tell us a little bit about a few other wonderful composers?
Yeah, I mean, you said it really well. I think the beginning of my research was essentially my album L under Atma, and that's where I kind of went on the hunt for not just works written by women. I mean, because that's not making anything better, right? I just wanted to showcase fantastic music, and that's why I wanted to really dig deep and find things that would go well together. And then, of course, like there's some of these women that I feel that I know now. They don't know me, but I know them. Liliane Fuchs is one of them. And also because, well, I don't pretend that my career is anything like hers, but that's definitely what I'm aspiring, you know, and she's such a great model for violists since the past 80 years. And she's played with everyone, you know. She was in a different position than Clark because she was in a musical family. You know, her brother Joseph, her brother, I think his name is Henry. They were both, you know, titled chair of the Cleveland Orchestra. And when she was brought up, she had this great music playing going around in the house. In fact, her father was amazing. He trained a parrot to tell them, go practice, go practice. You know, like there is this kind of like joyful atmosphere. And all of like Liliane's music is bite off at the upper corner because the parrot would eat her music. And he was such an amazing person. They moved to the Bronx, and they just opened their doors to anyone who wanted free music lessons. And they would serve food, and that was, of course, like not a good situation for Liliane's mother, who was like, why are you doing that? You're not bringing in any money. They're eating our food. Like, please stop doing this. But I think that contributed to the generosity and the humanity in her playing, and to those who have studied with her. She had such an incredible career. She played with everyone. I mean, she played with Casals also. She started this great musicians guild. This is not the guild that you know. This is a kind of like a cluster of kind of like the Nash ensemble in England, but in New York. and they would be sort of in residence at Carnegie and put on like these great shows and always have a premiere as part of the show. So that's how the Martinu Sonata that was composed for her came to be alive, and many other great works. And she was so active, and she was even in a position to decline a job offer at Juilliard for a viola professor initially. And she said, "Oh no, I'm a chamber musician," even though she had played solo with various ensembles, and I'm most at ease teaching and coaching chamber music. And so then she started coaching chamber music at Manhattan, and then she started teaching viola too. And then so Juilliard's school inquired again. She said yes, and she taught at Aspen. I mean, she had it all. But she, her composing career, she won some prizes early on for composing when she was graduating, and but her family was extremely supportive. One of her uncle, whenever she would win a prize, he would match the award money. So she bought a Landolfi with that methodology, which was really clever. Like, it's just a different mindset, right? And a different support system and sense of belonging, because she was a woman, but she had her brothers always with her almost. When she played the concertante, it was mostly with her brother. Or, and later on, she performed with her own children. So this just to tell you, and her husband was in finances, and he was in charge of all household duties. He would keep the books in straight, she would bring in the money. He would, just make sure there were babysitters, and so that she could just live her creative life. And so they're a few years apart, but it's completely different experience. But it's all because of the support system from home, from early on to adulthood.
That has to be an important aspect of those two different lives that you've told us about. What does she's writing music for chamber music solo?
She wrote initially a few pieces for violin, because all of these women, they played violin initially. That's something that I didn't mention, but from in Victorian era, the instrument of disposition for women were piano, because that's every household had a piano. And because you need to stay home and do laundry, it's better you practice piano so you can broom in between your sessions, right? And then
dry your clothes on the piano.
Yeah, and then you can do some little fixing the socks, so you can put on the piano. It's very handy. Not that there's anything wrong with fixing socks, I'm just saying. What was I going with this? Yes, so with the decline of the piano prices, for middle to upper class, this was no longer like a cool thing to do, to play piano. So that's when string instruments came in, especially violin, because, well, cello is kind of suggestive because you need to open your legs, right? And so violin is, you're facing only your profile to the audience, so just like the piano, so that's better. You're not doing anything suggestive, and, well, vibrato is an issue, but, so just to give you a little bit of context of why it comes to be that these women all start on violin or all also play piano. Liliane Fuchs started playing piano, and then she would go to her brother's lessons and as a collaborative pianist. And then when he was away on tour, she asked her teacher, "Can I take some violin lessons?" And when he came back, she could play really well already. And he was a little bit upset about that. Yeah, and then then the rest is history. She started playing viola because Kneisel, whom you may know from the really well-renowned chamber music festival, he asked to form a quartet for his daughter, and so they were lacking violists, and that's what she started to do. So that's how she came to be a violist. And her last anecdote about her father was really reluctant for her to switch to viola because she was already really successful as a violinist, and he trained the dog to play dead. And then he would ask the dog, would you rather play violin in the string quartet or play viola, play dead? And then he would play dead. Anyways, he was quite the character. Hey, we're getting some
some great
questions.
questions. Let's look at a few before if we want to have time to check them out. So let's go with I'll go in order. So Kaylin, can you see the questions also, Marina?
Yeah. Do you mind reading it?
I'll read it for you. So it's the first one. A personal question for Marina. Do you ever just get really mad about gender issues in music? I find it hard sometimes to manage getting frustrated with people treating women differently in orchestra or dismissing women composers and conductors, etc. How do you manage this so you can stay focused on your own progress and well-being?
Wow.
Good question.
If you don't mind leaving the question up for me, Jose, that would be so helpful because it just disappeared. Oh, it's unanswered. Okay. So, I mean, I feel very privileged, and I want to say that to begin with. I know that for I know that for other people it's much worse, but I'm in a good situation. But for example, I was hired in this beautiful forward-thinking establishment at UBC, and a very, very small thing, but it will just give you a sense of where we are in academia, right? On my floor, they changed it, but when I arrived, there was a men's faculty bathroom, and then nothing for women. This just gives you a sense of the tone in academia, right? That if you need to be comfortable and have your private space, as a man, you can. As a woman, you can't. And this is an issue because sometimes, I needed to pump milk for my baby, and I would have actually benefited from a private space because my office has windows that I cannot hide, right? So these kind of small things actually make a difference. And I mentioned it, and now they're gender neutral bathrooms, and there are no faculty, or it's just for everyone. And I think these progressive change, I try not to get mad, and I try instead to find solutions, which seems a little bit optimistic sometimes, but I think it's better for my well-being because I'm not just like ruminating like, oh, I can't do this, they can, this sucks. I try not to have this kind of mindset of being like, this seems like this is something that could be changed. Let me create a sentence that is like appealing, to make my point across, and let's find a solution as a team, because they hired me because they want me here. So this is like a very small detail about the bathroom, right? But this happens a lot in our life. And my first faculty meeting here, I think we were maybe 4 women faculty amongst a room full of men, and it's because other of the full-time faculty were not there at that point, but maybe we were 8 full-time faculty, which is a lot compared to other schools. Other schools is even less, and so I think when you're arriving at equal, you shouldn't hire women just because they're women. You should at matching competences, you should always prioritize minorities, whether it's women or race. So I think I'm hoping that that's gonna be the new world we live in. And of course, there's what makes me angry, and that I will tell you, is reversed sexism. So people who are complaining that, oh, because there was inequalities, now we're making up for it, and then there's too many like programs with women composers, and it's like, I think you're missing the point. This is actually reverse sexism, and that's hard it's hard to have conversations with these people, I find, and it's very present. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, more than.
Difficult one. Thank you for.
We have a good question here also from Ellis. So post-pandemic, what do you think needs to change in the classical music scene in order to better support marginalized musicians?
I kind of already answered, right? Like when
some of it you touch, yeah.
I think when you at equal talent, at equal capacities, at equal how do you say skills?
Yeah.
At equal skills, I think marginalized musicians need to be prioritized. And of course, we also work in a field that it's very hard to determine what is a skill and how is someone more skilled than the other. So there's so much subjectivity and it's very personal, but you know, it's a conversation that needs just to be talked about like we're doing today. Just I think the pandemic allowed for these large group of people internationally to meet and discuss, and today is not a presentation, it's really a discussion with Jean-Philippe and with you, that you're all together, we can be part of this change. I think I touched upon earlier in the discussion that I think that the pandemic facilitated in a way self-reflection, and a lot of organizations were confronted with everything that was going on in the States with Black Lives Matters, but also here in Canada, and all of the, you know, genocide that we did with the First Nations, and how do we go about reconciliation? And you know, we cannot erase history, but you know, it's the actions that are important, and education. You know, I think I for one love going on these great resources. There's the University of, is it Manitoba or Winnipeg, that is offering this great course on Canada's First Nation, and I think this is Dan Levy from Schitt's Creek is actually an ambassador of that program, and so we can all enroll for free and take these university courses. For women, there's Her Story from the Saskatoon Symphony. They made these webinars on, you know, history of women as composers, and there's all this content created during the pandemic that is made available to us at the tip of our fingers, and all we need to do is educate ourselves, then take concrete actions. But of course, it's for us as individuals, it's for organizations as a cluster. We all have a platform in a way, and especially as musicians. Musicians have always been so socially active, you know, from early on as I can even think of. But you know, maybe the pandemic will encourage even more of this. It's our role, but also organization needs to listen.
Right. Let's go to a question, Alexander's question. Very wonderful playing. As someone who knows very little about the viola repertoire, can you recommend a list of viola works I should check out, or composers generally that I may not have heard of? Well, we've certainly discovered a few today.
Yeah, I think Rebecca Clark, for viola lovers, that's a great place to start. Well, I mean, Hindemith is kind of our composer in residence for the viola, you know, like I personally didn't like Hindemith to begin with, but then when I went to his home and was surrounded by Tabea Zimmerman and her aesthetic and view of Hindemith, my view of Hindemith completely changed because there's such beauty in it. And more recent, if you go on my YouTube channel, you will see that I have some videos of more recent composers. So there's Anna Pidgorna. She's a composer that did PhD at Princeton University on women's sexuality and link in Ukrainian folklore. So that's like super niche, right? But it's really a fascinating research. And the viola, Alexander, is very rooted in Eastern European traditions. So there's a lot of rich repertoire in that area. If you think of Bartók, Shostakovich, if you like this type of repertoire, actually these two composers, they wrote their swan song to the viola. So we talked about Liliane Fuchs earlier. She commissioned the Martinu Sonata. So Martinu Sonata is on my YouTube channel, or it's on my first album. So there's a lot of content. Well, if you want to discover viola works that I like, go on Spotify and see what I've recorded, and then these are my suggestions, because obviously if I've recorded them, I like them.
And there's lots of commissioned works. That's what is so encouraging too for the instrument. There's lots of commissioned works being written for viola. maybe not enough yet, but still it's pretty good pool of it. I get scores from composers more and more for viola concertos, and it's great to see that.
My new favorite one is the Julia Adolf concerto.
Okay,
it's the best viola concerto that has ever been written. It's like Walton, like the beauty of the Walton concerto, but of today. It's very audience friendly, and well, she's an amazing composer, obviously. She writes a lot for the LA Phil, and she's, her career is just booming right now. But yeah, I would strongly recommend that you go down that rabbit hole.
That's great. Matthias asks, do you believe generational turnover in orchestras will allow for more works by female composers to be heard, or is the boys' club mentality too deeply ingrained in the classical world?
It remains to be seen, I think. I think people have good intentions. I believe in good in people, and I shared some data with you earlier. I'm assuming if we do this in a couple of years, I'm hoping it would be drastically different. But something to keep in mind is that, due to Darwinism, due to all of the beliefs that I shared with you earlier, we cannot make up for past history. We're just, there are women composers that have not been published, right? That people were not writing about. So we don't maybe know too much about them, but there's still most likely, even though we have like about equal amount of men and women on the earth since beginning of time, well, there were not the equal number of composers in that time, and not even today. So to think that it will be 50-50 tomorrow, I don't think so. Because we have, first of all, we have to discover all these pieces. So I shared with you a few pieces of Clark today, but she has about 100 now that has been discovered in the last decade. But if we do that for every woman composer that is a little bit known, that their rep list increases, and then we found out about more that collaborated with them. That's what research is for, is that we can find out what we don't know that already exists. But there's things that don't exist also. There's a gap. And now our job is to fill the gap, and for researchers to find things that we don't know. So I think, any of you that have gender studies, that you have that in you, I think I strongly encourage you, because this is such a rich field that is booming of interest, that is booming of resources. My study has been most likely much easier just because of all the resources online that I have access. And before, like if I wanted to read a journal, like some of a personal diary of Rebecca Clark, I would have to go to her house and get permission, and now we can find a lot online, and through your universities, most likely you have these great portals that you can search for thesis and search for manuscripts, and there's a lot available online. And my advice for today is that book an appointment with your librarian at your school if you can. Ask. If you don't ask, you're not going to get an appointment. But if you ask, especially if you're a grad student, they will most likely take the time to show you how to maximize your use of online research. Because Google Scholars will give you some information, but not all. And I really wish as a grad, as a master's student, I had done this. I did it as a doctoral student, and as faculty here, I'm really thankful for the UBC librarian, because he kind of took my hand and be like, hey, look at this. And then I was able to find so many things that I shared with you today very easily. But yeah, I would get in touch with your librarian. They're really cool researchers.
They certainly are.
It's a field that is, in danger. So we need to let them know that we need them.
Yeah, they have the keys to knowledge, to so much amazing stuff. Yeah. Marina, we have a quick question from you. You a little bit touched it when we heard the Schumann. Quand vous empruntez une pièce au répertoire du violon, la transposez-vous toujours? Ça nous vient d'un membre du public, de Mathieu, qui écoute sur... Olivier, pardon, qui écoute sur YouTube.
La question, c'est s'il y a une pièce pour violon, est-ce que c'est moi qui fais l'arrangement?
Quand vous empruntez une pièce au violon, est-ce que tu la transposes toujours ou tu la joues probablement? Est-ce que tu la joues dans la tonalité originale du violon, puis un peu comme tu as fait dans les Schumann?
Ça dépend. Ça dépend. Ça dépend de l'esthétique. Si la transposition ajoute une lourdeur à quelque chose qui doit être très effervescent ou puis que le registre est quand même faisable, je pense que je vais prioriser. Je vais prioriser. C'est ce que j'ai fait dans la deuxième romance. J'ai presque tout joué comme c'était. Mais par exemple, pour la première, il y a beaucoup de choses qu'il fallait aller un octave plus bas. Donc, ouais, je pense que ça dépend. Des fois, c'est plus simple d'aller toute une quinte plus bas. Mais des fois, le compositeur souvent pense vraiment à une tonalité en lien avec l'affect. Donc, je pense que c'est... Ouais, c'est quand même, il y a quand même plusieurs œuvres de Bach à l'époque qui étaient déjà transposées dans... Je pense que c'est une normalité quand même de transposer, mais il faut être conscient des dangers.
J'ai beaucoup aimé dans le Schumann comment tu l'as fait, puis tu viens de le dire un petit peu aussi, là, mais la fameuse quinte plus bas tout le temps, ça change tellement des fois les couleurs émotionnelles de quelque chose aussi. Hein, ça peut être...
L'octave plus bas, des fois, je me dis, l'octave plus bas, c'est comme, des fois, je me dis, j'améliore la pièce parce que comme c'est au violon, il ne pouvait pas aller là. Moi, j'y donne comme une profondeur de plus, c'est un plus grand range. Fait que moi, j'aime penser que des fois, je l'améliore.
Ah, la beauté de l'alto sur la corde de do, là, c'est...
On ne peut jamais en avoir assez.
Merci à tout le monde qui a envoyé des questions. Désolé si on n'a pas eu le temps de tous... Oh, we have one more.
Robert.
Oh, Robert. Oh, that's a new one. Okay, so Robert asks, do you think we would ultimately be better served in the long term by simply ignoring one's group identity, like race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, and instead just deeming musicianship paramount? That's a tough question.
Well, I was actually, I wanted to tell you that when I was in discussion with my label about my second album, which was Women Composer, I didn't see it as, hey, look, this is a CD about women composer. As I told you, I was really just looking for music that belonged together. And just like you would do for an all-male CD, you wouldn't say like, hey, look, this is all-male composers, right? I wanted to do the same, but for women, but the industry was not ready yet. And so we, the ATMA advised that we use L, just because CDs now are more, L is the feminine pronoun for her. And, now I see how that's not actually going to age well because I'm myself detaching from that pronoun myself. I see myself as simply a human, and I experienced this even when I was pregnant with my child. Everyone was asking me, what are you having, a girl or a boy? And I was like, I don't care. I'm having a human, I'm, as long as they have 5 fingers and, I don't, why is that important? To me, it was really not the point. And I see the same in music. And of course, we have to keep in mind that we need to favor minority when it's at equal skill or at equal quality. We need to favor it just because there's a gap. So we need to stand in the gap, fill the gap, but never compromise quality. And of course, like making a program of all, like if you're a white person and making a program of all Black composers, it looks funny. Or, same, just how can we integrate it that it's organic and that, you're not seeming like you're trying too hard. It's 2 years ago, it was a different story. We needed to counterbalance with only that type of programming. But I think now it's actually more organic if we see it as what goes well together, and then at equal skill, equal quality, just prioritize a minority.
Great answer. Oh, Marina, we could also keep you for the whole day, but we'll let you go now. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
It was wonderful to have a little peek in your brain and to also hear those wonderful pieces that you introduced us to. And I think your YouTube channel is great too. So I invite everybody to go and discover. There's many more on there. I spent lots of time last night listening, and it's everything is just damn good. So well done, Mademoiselle Marina. So we don't get to play with to do a concerto this year, but we'll we'll meet again soon somewhere.
Let's do the Adolphe. I think you will like it.
Okay. Sure. Yeah.
I'll call you.
OK, merci beaucoup, Marina. Merci d'avoir été avec nous.
Merci pour les questions. Thank you so much for your questions. This is a true indicator of change.
C'est super. Merci tout le monde qui était en ligne. Les gens du public sur YouTube aussi, un gros merci d'avoir passé un bout de temps avec nous. Just before we go, again, the OF would just like to thank our sponsors and donors. L'Orchestre de la francophonie, évidemment, remercie le gouvernement du Canada, le ministère du patrimoine canadien, ainsi que Emploi Québec, Île de Montréal, nos commanditaires Canimex et Panorama Média, et les fondations de la RBC, la Fondation Sibilla SE, le Fonds AIDA des jeunesses musicales du Canada et le Fonds de la famille Zeller, Zeller Family Foundation. Thanks all for spending those 2 moments with us today. And there's more coming, so have a look at the website of the OF. Everything is on there. Allez sur le site web de l'OF. Vous allez avoir le calendrier des activités à venir. Il y a plein de choses, dont des récitals de nos stagiaires qui vont débuter le 1er août jusqu'au 15 août de coups de cœur musicaux. Il y aura des projets de transformation digitale. Il y a des classes de maîtres qui s'en viennent. Donc, c'est vraiment le moment d'aller voir l'horaire. Marina, encore merci. Merci à tout le monde à la maison. Merci pour vos bonnes et intéressantes questions. Thank you all, and we'll see each other very soon. Have a good afternoon. Bon après-midi à tous.
Bye tout le monde. Merci.
Bye Marina.